So hello everyone and welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar, Helping Everyone Talk About Everywhere with James Cochran from What Three Words. My name is Stephanie. I'm the Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. I hope you're all enjoying the weather and getting outdoors, and I think we may be finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I want to say a special thanks to Credit Valley Conservation for supporting all of the work that we do. Before we get started, I just want to mention all of our June programs are now live on our website. So please register for as many free programs as you would like. On your screen now, you should see the entire calendar of virtual events. We have a lot of interesting guest speakers in June, so please check them out. As well, if you have a more personal experience for your family, club, or community group, please check out our virtual programs such as Healing with Nature, Trivia Nights, wildlife-specific programs, and more by registering at the riverwoodconservancy.org/virtual discovery. And if you would like to support our virtual and hopefully soon in-person programs and conservation of Riverwood's habitat and wildlife, please consider donating on our website. Before we get to our speaker today, the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. The territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. And today we have James Cochran with us, who is a partnerships lead at What Three Words and responsible for their work in Canada. He works with a range of industry partners, including emergency services, local government, infrastructure companies, parks, outdoor communities, and NGOs to help them start using What Three Words technology in their operations. And I hope we are able to do so at Riverwood at some point. And we also have a volunteer from the Riverwood Conservancy, Sarah, with us today, who has been volunteering with us for nearly 3 years. A huge thanks to Sarah for helping us out on her lunchtime. And if you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat, Q&A, or comment section, and we will address them at the very end of the presentation. So James, I think that is all from me. I will hand it over to you now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And I hope everyone's doing well. If I just share my screen, let me know if you can see that okay, Stephanie. Brilliant. Great. So first of all, thank you very much, Stephanie and the Riverwood Conservancy for having me. Brilliant to have the opportunity to speak to you all and tell you a little bit about What Three Words, what we do, some of the work that we're doing in Ontario and the rest of Canada and around the world. I hope that the things I cover will be helpful from both a personal perspective, but also for those of you involved in the Riverwood Conservancy or other similar programs in your day-to-day work. Hopefully there'll be lots of time for questions at the end, and I'm sure there might be one or two, so please do feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we go through. So to kick things off, as Stephanie said, I'm James Cochran. I work in the partnerships team here at What Three Words. As you can probably tell, I'm based in the UK, in London, and I'm responsible for part of our team that is working with partners in Canada, which is a market which has become very important for us over the last couple of years, which is really exciting. So to start from the beginning, What Three Words is essentially a really simple way to talk about any location. And the reason that we exist in the first place is that ultimately today, there are lots of problems with the ways that we can communicate a location. So street addresses were not designed for the digital age. In fact, street addresses themselves were created hundreds of years ago for one purpose, and that was to send post, to send mail. And for today's world, where we're used to having a taxi arrive in 5 minutes, expecting a drone to be able to land at a precise location by entering a destination, or to have next day delivery or even same day delivery by people like Amazon, the street addresses that exist don't fit the needs that we have today. So that is ultimately why What Three Words was created. And as I'm sure lots of you will be aware, there are lots of challenges with the ways that you can communicate a location day to day. The first of which is that there are lots of places in Ontario, in Mississauga, in Canada, in the UK, that simply don't have an address. So as you can see from this image, if you're out camping, hiking, and you're trying to tell someone exactly where this amazing viewpoint is to set up your tent, it can be really challenging to tell them exactly where that location is. Similarly, if you're out in Algonquin, and again, Stephanie, correct me if my pronunciation is terrible on some of these names, but brilliant. It can be very difficult to tell someone exactly where you are if you're in amongst these amazing forests or on the shores of the lake, for example. Or if you're trying to tell someone where this beautiful spot is, where you've taken this photograph, again, somewhere that's quite difficult to describe. So I'm sure these kinds of problems are pretty familiar to lots of you living in a place like Canada. There are lots of wide open, beautiful spaces, and it can be difficult to share a location within those areas very easily. But also, there are actually lots of problems even when we do have an address. And this is maybe something that we don't think about so often. In the UK, we have lots of issues, despite being one of the best addressed countries in the world when it comes to our addressing system. So here in the UK, we use the postcode system. To give you an example on the screen here, you can see if I type an address, such as College Farm in Rutland into Google Maps, Google will drop a pin on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen there, which is great. But if you know the area well, you'll actually know that College Farm is 500 meters down the road. And actually, if you're trying to get to someone, say for an emergency, that can cost you vital seconds or minutes trying to find the right location. There are lots of other things that, again, we might not think about regularly. Things like duplicate street names. So here in the UK, Church Road is the most common example of this. In Liverpool, as you can see, there are 5 church roads. In London, there are 15. There are thousands around the country. Every village, town, and city has multiple church roads, as you can imagine, from streets being built over centuries. Every country has its own nuance of this. If you happen to go to Mexico City, for example, they have 632 Juarez streets, which is a bit of an issue if you're trying to find someone and you're not familiar with the city. And actually, I had a quick look on Google Maps, and a similar issue in Mississauga is when it comes to things like Queen Street being quite a good example. You have lots of variations of Queen Street North, Queen Street East, the Queensway, Queensway West, Queenston Drive, Queensbridge Drive. As you can tell, it's a bit of an issue for someone like me who's never been to the area. It's very easy for me to end up in the wrong place. And another problem that, again, we maybe don't think about day to day, but affects millions of people very frequently, is when we come to large sites. So whether that is a stadium, a hospital campus or a university campus, which has one fixed address, but multiple entrances, multiple car parks, accessible entrances, emergency access points or delivery points, for example, it can be very difficult to specify exactly which one you're trying to refer to. And lastly, another common problem, which is a big pain point for especially fast growing, developing cities where you have new builds and new developments popping up all the time. It can take anywhere from a few weeks to up to 6 months here in the UK for a new address to be registered and updated in all of the databases that we rely on every day. So when you move into your new office or your new home, it can be really difficult to have your sofa or your couch delivered to you. But also if there's an emergency when you move in, it's actually pretty hard for the emergency services and first responders to find you if you don't have an address that they can put into their sat nav. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the problem that we're trying to solve. I think a lot of those issues might be familiar to some of you. I would love to hear if there are any particular challenges in the local area that I don't know about already. Obviously, there are solutions that are available already and they work incredibly well. And sharing a pin on a map is one thing that works really, really well. It's something that I do, to be honest, I do quite regularly. If I'm out and about exploring, going to meet friends in a park, somewhere that doesn't have a fixed street address, I can send my live location on WhatsApp, I can drop a pin on Google Maps, and they can see exactly where I am. The problem with a pin on a map is that it's not a very flexible solution. So if I want to describe to someone where that pin is over the phone or over the radio, or I want to write that down or put it on a website or on a printed flyer somewhere, for example, it can be really difficult to transfer that location from one device to another device, or from one format to another format, or to verbally communicate it. So that's essentially the problem that we wanted to solve with What 3 Words. You know, GPS coordinates are a solution which have been around for a very long time. And they work incredibly well because they're extremely precise and they're universal. So it doesn't matter if you're in central Toronto or out in the middle of a national park somewhere, you can always use a GPS coordinate to communicate exactly where you are. The problem being that they're not very easy to use for a human being on a day-to-day basis. So ultimately, there's a reason why people don't use coordinates to tell each other where they are on a day-to-day basis. It's pretty much impossible for a human being to remember a string of 16 numbers without making a mistake somewhere. So that is ultimately where What 3 Words comes in. And for anyone that knows a bit about us already, you'll know this. But essentially what we've done to solve this problem is take the entire world, divide it up into a grid of 57 trillion squares. Every square is 3 meters by 3 meters, or 9 by 9 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet by 10 feet roughly, and give every single square in the world a fixed address made of 3 random words from the dictionary. So rather than having to use a string of 60 numbers to refer to this exact spot on a pier in Ontario, for example, all I need to tell you is meet me at Minders Trim Vector, and you can type that into the What 3 Words app and find me straight away. Similarly, if you break down on the side of the road and you're trying to get the CAA to find you, for instance, you can give them your 3 words, which might be league planted flips in this example. Or if you're into skiing and you're up a mountain and you either want to tell someone where you are for lunch, or you have an emergency and you're trying to tell Mountain Rescue how to find you, you might tell them to meet you at Filling's Illusionist Leaked. Or even in central London, for instance, if you're just, you know, the sun is now starting to come out here in the UK and you might want to go for a socially distanced picnic, you can tell someone to meet you at Flip Monday Nearly. And lastly, you know, coming back to the example that I gave earlier, if you're coming to a large site, like a stadium, for example, you can now give a precise address for every entrance, every delivery point, every beer stand, every car park that you want to tell someone how to get to. So that's a bit the basic concept of What 3 Words. Again, there'll be time for questions at the end, so hopefully that made some sense. To go into a little bit more detail about how it really works in practice, as I mentioned before, we have an app. It's free to download, it's free to use for anyone, any business, any individual. You can have a play around. You'll see that the whole world has been mapped already. So you can zoom in to anywhere, you can select the square and find the 3 words for that location. You can search for an address if you're given one. So if I tell you to meet me somewhere, I can give you those 3 words. You can type them into the search bar, and then you can navigate just like you would with Google Maps or Apple Maps or any other navigation app that you've got on your phone. Another really important thing to point out about the app itself is that it works completely offline. So even if you're in a really remote location, you know, if you're in the middle of Riverwood Conservancy, for instance, not so remote, but you might not have amazing phone signal all the time, you can always find the 3 words for your current location using the What 3 Words app. So what's really happening with our technology is all we actually do in the background is that we take a system which works really well, which is a GPS coordinate, and we turn it into a slightly more human-friendly format. So really, all our technology does is takes a 16-digit latitude, longitude coordinate, converts it into 3 words, and vice versa. So it's a really simple piece of technology. And usually one of the first questions that people ask are, you know, are the words random? And the short answer is yes, they are randomly assigned based on a word list, which we create. So we take the dictionary and we essentially strip it down to the most commonly used words in the dictionary. But there's a couple of really clever bits of technology that's built into the system to make it as easy as possible to use. So one of those is that we have actually intentionally shuffled similar sounding words as far away as possible. So if you do make a small mistake, if you mistype a word or you misspell a word or you mishear a word, you can spot that mistake really easily. So the example that you can see on the screen here is the 3-word address filled count soap, which are the 3 words for the What 3 Words office in London. You can see that filled count also is in Maryland in the US, and filled count stop is in Oklahoma. So hopefully you can realize which one you're referring to and make sure that you always end up in the right place. The other really important thing to point out is that obviously we're a British company. So as I mentioned, we're based in London. So we started with English. So the whole world has been mapped using English words. But what we've now done is roll the technology out to 47 other languages so far and counting, so that ultimately we want everyone and anyone to be able to use What 3 Words in their own language. And in terms of what we do as a business, I won't go into loads of detail because I don't think you want to have lots of detail on the business side of things, but we do work across a whole range of different sectors. So everything from travel and tourism, working with brands like Lonely Planet, Time Out, hotel chains around the world who want to give their guests or travelers an easier and more precise way of finding key destinations, whether it's the front door to their hotel, the best restaurant to go to in a new city that they've never visited and they don't speak the language. So they help by providing a 3-word address for that exact location. In the middle of the screen there, you can see the kinds of companies that build our core technology into their own systems. So that is everything from car companies to delivery and logistics companies, and any kind of navigation app as well. So giving people a more precise way of giving their address for a delivery. If you live in a house that might be quite difficult to find and your Amazon driver sometimes can't find you and it's a failed delivery, you can give him a 3-word address to help him find you first time, every time. If you want to drive to a camping site that might not have a street address, you can put in the 3 words for that exact camping spot and have that as a destination in your car sat nav, for instance. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you can see all of the kinds of organizations that we work with who try and utilize our core technology in their day-to-day operations. So as Stephanie mentioned at the start, we work with emergency services around the world, but also with infrastructure companies. So that is municipalities, utilities, organizations who manage any infrastructure or land. So organizations like the Riverwood Conservancy or national parks, for example. Essentially, any organization that manages infrastructure that is in places that might be hard to describe and might have teams of people working in, lone and remote places where they need to share a location easily. And here in the UK, we work with lots of environmental organizations. So you might recognize some of these. Appreciate these are very UK-based organizations, but just to give you an idea, people like the RSPCA, Forestry England, the National Farmers Union, the Rivers Trust, all of these organizations who help to manage environmental projects by using what3words as an easier way of sharing locations. And just to show you a few of those examples that I touched on, in case you're interested, this is what it looks like in a Mercedes sat-nav. So if you are lucky enough to own a Mercedes, all of the new Mercedes on the road now have what3words built in to the navigation system. So you can either speak or type a 3-word address into the car, and it will recognize that as an address and allow you to drive to that exact 3-meter square. With Lonely Planet, you can see an example here. If you happen to be lucky enough again to go to Mongolia, I'd highly recommend it. But if you don't happen to speak Mongolian or understand the local language or street addresses, you can now find your way around using Lonely Planet with the 3 English words for every point of interest in their guidebook. Again, logistics and deliveries being a really good example. So here in the UK, we work with Hermes, who are the biggest package delivery company in the country, to help them find customers more easily. And a really cool example here that happened quite recently is that we had the first ever drone package delivery happen on the west coast of Scotland. Here in the UK, the Royal Mail delivered a package to this very remote lighthouse, as you can see, on the Isle of Mull in Scotland. So that was quite a cool project that we were involved in a couple of months ago. Now, to make it a little bit more relevant for everyone today, the reason for speaking to you all, obviously, is that we are doing a lot of work in Canada and specifically a lot of work in Ontario. So actually, this slide is slightly out of date now, but we've been working with emergency services across Canada for about 18 months now. The adoption has been amazing. So there's now, as you can see, 39 comm centers or PSAPs around the country that are set up and trained to use what3words to help locate 911 incidents when you call 911. And what this has led to is loads of amazing stories like these in the press. You may or may not have seen some of these happening and coming out over the last few months of people being rescued using the what3words app. And as you can see, there's been quite a few success stories, particularly in Ontario. It's quite important to point out that Ontario has very much led the way in terms of the provinces in Canada, which has been really, really exciting for us. So the OPP, as you can see, are set up and using what3words, and they've had lots of successful uses of the technology to help locate, as you can see, snowmobile collisions, hikers that get lost, people that get lost in the dark and they don't know where they are. So lots of really dangerous situations where people get disorientated, and they can use what3words to simply give the 3 words for exactly where they are so that they can be found more easily. And again, you might have seen some of these examples popping up. There's been lots of kind of social media, really fun social media activity to encourage people to download the what3words app to make sure that they're prepared in case of an emergency. Even people like Kingston Fire and Rescue, as you can see, adding the 3-word address for their front door in big writing on the window there. And aside from emergency services, there are loads and loads of ways that people can and have already started using what3words across the province. So the Scouts is one organization that have got very interested and involved. As you can imagine, it's quite a fun, novel way of finding your way around, and it's a really fun way of engaging with kids to get them to find out where they are and know their way around an area slightly better. So you can do things like treasure hunts, Easter egg hunts that we had going on over the last couple of months, which has been really exciting to see. As you can see, Kivy Park on the bottom right of the screen there, they ran a contest for people to download the app and had a treasure hunt around the park to encourage people to make sure that they had the app on their phone so that when they had an emergency, they could use it ultimately. And lots of other ways. So as you can see on the bottom left, people like the city of Vancouver in BC adding 3-word addresses to their website to help people find the precise site locations for some of their accessible entrances, for example. And more recently, in terms of COVID times, obviously, hopefully coming out of them quite soon. But What 3 Words has been very widely used for COVID response here in the UK and around the world. As you can imagine, being able to communicate a precise location in the last 18 months has become even more important when you're talking about things like finding a safe entrance to a hospital, a COVID-free entrance, for example, a safe place or contact-free delivery for your delivery driver so that you don't need to come into contact with lots of people when you're self-isolating, PPE deliveries, all of these kinds of use cases which weren't a thing for What 3 Words 2 years ago, but have now very much become really important for us to help the emergency services that we work with. And something slightly closer to home, I suppose, and a bit more kind of mundane and day-to-day than COVID planning is things like public reporting of incidents. So if you're trying to tell your local municipality where there's been trail damage or there has been some illegal dumping or a pothole, for instance, all of these kinds of incidents happen in places that are usually quite difficult to describe. So What 3 Words gives people a really easy way of relaying those locations to the local authorities. And just to show you a quick example of this, actually, Matagami, again, apologies if that is mispronounced, Matagami Region Conservation Authority have updated their incident reporting part of the website to allow people to give a 3-word address and ask people to use What 3 Words if they're reporting an incident or a hazard along one of their trails. And finally, one really nice way that people have started to use What 3 Words, and a really quick and easy way to start using it, is by adding 3-word addresses to physical signs. So whether that is public safety signage or public wayfinding signage on trails, trailhead markers, that kind of thing, being able to give people a quick visual reference for where they are by adding the 3 words for that location can be a really nice way of engaging with the local community and getting them to start using What 3 Words. So you can see a few examples here from parks around the world. The bottom left example is actually all of the beaches around Sydney in Australia have added What 3 Words addresses to their signs so that if there's an emergency, a shark attack or something, or a particularly bad rip current, they can use What 3 Words to report that incident. So that's the general overview. I hope that's been interesting. I wanted to finish off, if it's okay, Stephanie. I've got a short 1-minute video that just gives a quick summary of all of the work that we've been doing with the emergency services in Canada. So I'll leave you with this.
There's no audio, James. If you stop sharing and then when you click on share screen again, there should be an option at the bottom left corner that says share.
Yeah, sound. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Let me know if it works this time.
In emergency services and frontline policing, it's about time. It's about being efficient and being quick. People's lives depend on how fast we can respond and accurately identify where they are. What 3 Words uses technology that identifies every 3 by 3 square meter in the world with 3 unique identifying words.
Callers use the free app to find their location, or get a text with a link from the call operator.
Receiving those 3 words, first responders can come and find you instantly.
North Vancouver is surrounded by these beautiful mountains. We take a lot of our calls from there, and the biggest challenge was finding their location.
There was an injured snowshoer that twisted her ankle. They thought they were on the north side of one of the lakes way up in the Seymour Mountains. We used the what 3 words and we were able to determine they were actually on the south side of the lake. So we're able to give those for responders, be able to locate where this patient was. We certainly got there a lot faster because of this app.
And there are opportunities here, I think, to save lives.
Brilliant. So that's it from me. Thank you, Stephanie, and everyone. Very happy to answer a few questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, James. That was an awesome presentation. And I know we spoke briefly before this presentation, and you gave me a little bit of a rundown on what 3 Words and what it was about, but wow, it does a lot. It does a lot of stuff, which is awesome. And I think many of us can relate that work and enjoy Riverwood. It's great for the emergency aspect of it, but also you mentioned public reporting, which I think is so important. And we've usually been like, there's garbage on the south side of the trail near the big pine tree past 600-kilometer mark or whatever. So it's just, I think we'll be using this a lot more often now to report on many other things too, which is great. We do have a question. How did you decide on the 3 by 3 meter squares for the grid?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I lost you for a second there, Stephanie.
Oh, sorry. How did you decide on the 3 by 3 meter squares for the grid? Can you hear me?
Yes. So in terms of the size of the squares, I imagine that's the question.
Yes.
Yeah, good question. So I think, first of all, we thought we wanted to create a system which is usable enough for it to be useful for things like a car parking space or a front door or a gate, but not so small that it becomes too granular. And the other practical reason is that ultimately you would run out of words. So as I mentioned, there are 57 trillion squares to cover the entire world. We have a list of 40,000 words to cover those, because 40,000 cubes is 64 trillion, if you happen to be very good at maths. So there's a few trillion squares and combinations spare. But if you went any smaller, you would need a lot more words. So that's the reason.
Awesome, thank you. Another question comes in on Facebook as well. If what 3 words is used by an organization on wayfinding signage, do you recommend they connect with you prior to implementing that?
I mean, the short answer is yes, we would love to speak to you. So we're always happy to help. And we have, as you would have seen, lots of partners that we've worked with previously that we can provide toolkits for training your teams. We've got imagery and copy that you can use to drop into any templates that you're using. But otherwise, feel free to go ahead and get started without us. But I've left my email on the screen, so please do reach out and I'd be very happy to help.
That's awesome. Another question too, how did this initiative begin? So I guess what sparked the start of it? Yeah,
a really good question. So that was actually, our co-founder and CEO, Chris, strangely enough, he used to work in the music business, and he had a very big problem with musicians and equipment getting lost, trying to find festivals in fields where there was one postcode and there were 100,000 people, or going to a stadium where there were 15 different entrances and they were trying to drop off, big speakers and equipment. So he actually started using GPS coordinates to try and get around that problem, but then ran into more problems when, unsurprisingly, the odd drummer or guitarist put in the wrong number and ended up on the wrong longitude but the right latitude. So he sat down with an old friend of his who luckily happened to be a very impressive mathematician from Cambridge, and also had a PhD in linguistics. And so they came up with a system using words and did kind of the back of the envelope numbers and figured out exactly how many words they would need, and how many squares, and that's where the idea came from.
Wow, that's awesome. Sorry, I actually am receiving comments from somebody that works for the OPP that's watching, and they are sending articles that were relevant to their area. So there was somebody found in Pioneer Provincial Park that was lost, an avid hiker, and yeah, she just sent me that article, which is really cool too.
Oh, amazing, brilliant.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to understand, there's one more question on Facebook too. Can we Google where is, for example, a truck yesterday and get the location? So I'm assuming seeing if something from the past. Can you find a location of something in the past? I think that's what they're trying to get at.
Yeah, so I think yes. So if they know roughly the location of the truck, then they can. As I mentioned, the whole world is mapped. So if you go on to what3words.com or you go onto the app, you can find the roads and you can discover the 3 words for that exact location. Obviously, if you don't know where you left the truck, that could be quite tricky. But yes, every single square has an address. So if you can find the square, you can find the address for that.
Awesome. We have a question in the chat says, if I wanted to get directions to a park, how would I begin, or how would I start?
So the way to think of what 3 words is just like a normal address. So it would need to be given to you by someone else. So just like someone might send you a street address, you can be sent a what 3 words address. So like some of the examples I gave earlier, lots of parks now add the 3 words for their park entrances on their websites, or they put it on their social media posts so that people can find those entrances more easily. So either you found it on a contact page on a website, someone might have sent it to you over text message as an SMS, or they've told you those words over the phone. So yeah, just like a traditional address, it's given to you by someone.
Awesome. And you answered many of the other questions. One of them that came up was what happens if you don't have Wi-Fi, which you answered. I wonder, kind of going off of that, does this work in the same way as like Google Maps, in where you click on a location and it shows you the actual path to get there? Or does it just show you where it is on the map specifically?
Yes, so the What 3 Words app works completely offline. So the grid system, which is our technology, doesn't need any data connection at all. So you can always use What 3 Words in the What 3 Words app, no matter whether you have any phone signal. You can test it out on airplane mode and have a play around. The way the navigation works is if you click the navigate button in the What 3 Words app, it will actually give you the option of selecting Google Maps or Apple Maps or any navigation app. So it just takes you through to that app so that you can then navigate there. So it works in exactly the same way as navigation within Google Maps, essentially.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, that's all the questions that we have in the chat, and I'll give you a moment to kind of wrap things up. Sarah, I know both of us can kind of relate that Riverwood is sometimes hard to describe where you are on the trail to other people. Often we're texting like specific landmarks. Oh, it's near that place where the blue heron always hangs out, or something weird like that. So I think I'll definitely be using this in the future for programs and even reporting where things are. But thank you so much. And we're getting a lot of great comments and in the chats as well, and saying how great it is that there's so many success stories as well. So I don't know if you have any final words, James, before we say goodbye today.
Just to say thank you again for having me to present. And as I mentioned, we're based in the UK, so it can be difficult to find the right people to speak to. But if you know of any organizations or businesses that you think would benefit from using What 3 Words, please do get in touch, and I'd love to speak to them and help them get started.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure we will be in touch about how we can integrate this into Riverwood. And someone just commented in the chat too, the Riverwood Conservancy's front door is safety, vegans, and sounds, which is very interesting. And we have another comment saying, this is fascinating, but I may have to upgrade my phone. So thanks so much, James, for the presentation today. It was really informative, really cool. And thank you, Sarah, as well, for volunteering your time on your lunch hour. And I will be speaking with both of you soon. So everyone have a great day and get outside. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.